The Salem witch trials were a series of trials that happened from June 1692 to May 1693 in a small village named Salem Village in Massachusetts. While witch hunts weren't a new concept, the Salem witch trials are one of the most famous examples. The trials began when several young girls began acting strangely. The daughter of Samuel Parris, 9-year-old Elizabeth Betty, and his niece, 11-year-old Abigail, were the first to be afflicted. They were screaming, making odd sounds, throwing things, and claimed they felt like they were being pinched and bitten. In February, they were seen by a doctor who didn't know what was wrong and said it was supernatural and devilish. Pressured by Paris to identify their tormentor, Betty and Abigail claimed to have been cursed by three marginalized members of the community. These three girls were Tituba, a slave owned by Paris, Sarah Good, a short-tempered beggar, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had been scorned for her romantic involvement with a servant. In March, magistrates had come from Salem town and began a public inquiry. Initially, Tituba claimed to be innocent, but after being repeatedly questioned and harassed, she told everyone what they wanted to hear. She said that in the middle of the night she was visited by the devil and made a deal with him. After 3 days of testimony, she described encounters with Satan's animal familiars and with a tall man who had told her to sign her name in the Devil's Book. In the book, she also claimed to have seen the names of Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, along with 7 other names she couldn't read. Because of Tituba's statement, the magistrates had a confession and also evidence of more witches in the village. After that, a lot more young women started having hysterical fits and breakdowns. Some of the girls who started acting strangely were 12-year-old Ann Putnam Jr., her mother, Ann Putnam Sr., her 16-year-old step-cousin, Mary Walcott, 17-year-old Elizabeth Hubbard, and their 19-year-old servant, Mercy Lewis. The people now being identified as witches were no longer outcasts but were upstanding members of the community, and they were mostly enemies of the Putnam family. On May 27th, 1672, after weeks of informal hearings followed by imprisonment, William Phips, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, ordered the assembly of an official court examination and terminer in Salem town. Presided over by William Stoughton, the colony's lieutenant governor, the court consisted of 7 judges. The accused were forced to defend themselves without the aid of counsel. However, it was very hard to do so because the judges believed they had spectral evidence of people saying they had been attacked by the spirits of the accused witches and claimed that Satan had used said spirits for his evil deeds. The accused who had tried to defend themselves and the girls and young women in the stands had started writhing and babbling, providing evidence of the demonic presence. The people who confessed or named other witches were spared from the court's wrath, and the people who continued saying they were innocent suffered harsher punishments. On June 2nd, 1692, Bridget Bishop was one of the first defendants to be arrested, and then on June 10th, she was hanged in a place that would later be called Gallows Hills. On June 19th, 5 more of the accused were hanged. 2 of the 5 people hanged were Sarah Good and Rebecca Nurse. George Burroughs was a minister from 1680 to 1683. He was summoned from his home in Maine and was accused of being the witches' leader. He was arrested and hanged with 4 other people on June 19th. Just before he was hanged, he recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly, which was something that no witch had been thought of being capable of doing. On September 22nd, 8 more people were hanged, including a woman named Martha Corey, whose 80-year-old husband, Giles Corey, had been executed 2 days earlier by having increasingly heavy stones placed on him until he was crushed to death. On October 29, 1692, Governor Phipps ordered the court to no longer take spectral evidence. The trials resumed in January, and of the 56 people tried, only 3 were convicted. Along with everyone else in custody, they were freed by Phipps by the end of the trials in May 1693. However, in 1976, almost 300 years later, Dr. Linda Caporial made a potentially history-changing discovery. She found evidence that there could have been a disease in rye bread that caused some of the twitching and biting sensations under the skin. After a while, more historians began to agree with this theory. Surprisingly, many events could be connected to rye bread. Ergot is a fungal disease that infects many different grains. The way ergot is formed in rye before harvest is when there is a dry winter and a damp spring, and these conditions were met in the harvest of 1691. When rye contracts ergot, the ergot replaces shoots on the grain with sclerotia. Sclerotia are compact, hardened masses of mycelium that allow the ergot to survive rough weather and climates. Ergot sclerotia are purple and black, and they contain lysergic acids and argotamine. Ergot is shown with darker shoots on the rye, so when it is harvested, it is assumed to have darkened because it was out in the sun. Due to this misunderstanding, it is harvested and eaten, even though it is poisonous. After eating the poisoned rye bread, the effects of ergotism or St. Anthony's fire are muscle spasms, delusions, the feeling of crawling underneath the skin, discoloration of the skin, and severe hallucinations. The lysergic acid, which is what causes these symptoms, is used in the synthesized drug LSD, and these symptoms were the same that people were showing during the Salem witch trials. In conclusion, the Salem witch trials were a very important part of history, and with the information we have today, we think that the trials could have been caused by a disease in rye bread, and because of that disease, the accused most likely didn't actually do anything wrong. And setting all of that aside, there was no burning of witches at the stake. That is just a common rumor.